capacity for approved housing bodies to be able to have an influence on the current housing crisis. So just to kick off, many of you will be, I think, quite familiar with a lot of what's been in the press in recent times with regard to the current housing issues. And you can see just a variety of some of the headlines that we've seen in recent months. So quite recently, we saw a lot of publicity given to the fact that people, particularly young families, are finding it difficult to start off on the property ladder, finding it very difficult to buy property and to settle down. We're seeing a lot of commentary as well with regard to the economic impact of the current housing issues and the difficulties that that may impose in terms of foreign direct investment and the capacity of companies to move into Ireland and be assured that they can have a workforce who will actually have somewhere to live close at hand to where they work. A lot of regulatory comment as well with regard to the need to look at shoddy housing rental properties and to impose standards, and again more regulation coming in that regard. I saw the other day, just in one of the newspapers, a photograph that actually brought back a lot of images from the past, from the period of maybe 10 years ago, with people queuing up in Bray from well before dawn to have an opportunity to put a deposit down on a new build. And interestingly, the bottom quote just on the slide is not from one of the Irish newspapers, but it's from a London broadsheet, the London Independent, which had an extensive report recently on the fact that there is such a crisis within housing in Ireland, and commenting in particular on the fact that there were on average 3 families a day losing their home within Ireland. So this has got beyond our own shores, and it's something which is being recognised as an issue which is having not just an impact on Ireland and the people in Ireland, but also an impact on companies that may be looking to invest within this country. So clearly issues to be resolved. Many solutions obviously have been put forward, and I think some of you who will have been present at the Minister's presentation this morning will have heard a variety of things. But again, you know, a lot of economists and other commentators would have all manner of solutions. What we're going to talk about this morning is just one particular slice of the cake, and that is with regard to the voluntary housing sector and the contribution that it can make and does make. So just the human context, I suppose, again, it's something that we see a lot of. And one of the figures which I think was in many ways quite shocking, produced back in January, I think Focus Ireland had shown that there was a record for that month of 125 families involving over 250 children who were made homeless in that month alone, in Dublin alone. And the current lists would suggest that there are over 5,500 people, 912 families homeless, and coming up on 2,000 children homeless. That obviously has a huge impact in terms of society and the difficulties that have been significantly reported in that regard. So what does the voluntary housing sector do, and what is the contribution that it currently makes and can make in future? Well, just to give you a few facts and figures, there are over 300 housing associations in this country at present. They would range from some very small entities with perhaps a tiny handful of properties, all the way up to some very large organisations, some very large housing entities, the likes of Crowe, who have 5,000 and 2,000 plus housing units respectively. And then Choice Housing Ireland, which is an all-island entity composed of 3 former housing associations which merged in the last year or so, based in Belfast, but operating across the whole of the 32 counties, and with a very significant appetite to develop further. They currently run over 12,000 housing units. They employ a staff of over 300. So, you know, this is a significant business by any stretch of the imagination. And there's quite a complex structure with regard to the public sector and how money can be got and how finance can be obtained in respect of approved housing bodies. The voluntary housing sector tends to refer to itself as AHBs, approved housing bodies. So you've got the likes of the Housing Finance Agency, which provides loan finance. You've got the Housing Agency, which provides other support to local authorities and to approved housing bodies, and a variety of other organisations up and down the country which would have a significant involvement from the public sector side. So there's, I think, a fairly complex architecture with regard to how the state gets involved in the provision of social housing. And to give you some facts and figures, the Irish Council for Social Housing, which I think many of you will be familiar with, produces some very interesting information, and I've actually borrowed liberally with their permission from a fact sheet that they produced recently. So they've got a 2015 activity report which presents a lot of very useful material in respect of the social housing sector. So as you can see from the infographic there, in 2015 over 1,300 homes composed of both new build and purchase were delivered by approved housing bodies to meet the demand, and that number has gone up quite significantly, and you can see how things were fairly depressed over the last few years. It's pretty much a drop in the ocean, I think, and there's a lot more that can be done. And I guess one of the issues that we're going to be looking at this morning is the potential contribution that can be made by the voluntary housing sector. Homes provided in 2015, again you can see on the infographic, 2,400 homes, that's basically people off the waiting list, broken down into 1,300 new build and purchase, and about 1,100 relets of existing homes under various capital funding schemes. The current position, as you can see there, again in the last year we've had a situation where 5,500 homes proposed under the multi-annual CAF funding in relation to loan finance, again from the state. 13 housing associations given certified borrower status by the Housing Finance Agency. Again, that's a relatively complex process to go through, but it's something that has to be done as part of this. Over 100 million in loan finance accessed by housing associations to provide 700 homes, and 10% of the total housing output in 2015 was down to housing associations. So the contribution made is a significant one, and I think it's one that can continue. It requires a bit of engineering to get it to the point where it can deliver to its maximum. State-supported housing, again a very interesting graphic. You'll see from that 129,000 homes provided by local authorities, 30,000 provided by housing associations, approved housing bodies, 27,000 provided by private sector leasing, and 67,000 in terms of the rent supplement scheme. So it's a very, very sizable contribution to the overall sector with regard to those who require state support with regard to housing provision. So I'm going to hand over to Vincent, and Vincent will talk us through some very particular examples.
Thanks, Shane. Rather than talk too much, I'm going to show you a video of a project that we completed in the autumn of last year. And this is a traditional kind of development in Drogheda, County Louth, where the local authority gave us a site and we went and built 25 houses. So rather than me tell you about it, well, I'm on there anyway, so we'll just show that, Shane. We're here to celebrate the allocation of 25 new homes to people from the social housing waiting list in Louth County Council. This development was originally given planning permission in 2009, and the council had intended to construct the houses, but due to the cutbacks in the capital budgets for social housing at the time, they were unable to proceed. They asked North and East to come on board with a mixture of funding, some still 100% from the state, but a significant portion was borrowed privately.
This development is something that all local authorities throughout the country can look at, because it's a classic model of a partnership between the banking industry, the North East Housing Association, which is a voluntary housing association, and the local authority. So this partnership has produced a top-class quality housing development. Also, it gives a great chink of light, I suppose, for people who are anxious to be housed, those thousands of people throughout the country who are looking to be housed and who need now to be facilitated. These kind of projects, there's a model now for this, and I believe this can be extended throughout the country.
I was just talking to one of the tenants there. First of all, it's a chance to a new start in a wonderful house. he was saying that just with the solar panels, his heating, he's looking forward to the winter because his heating bills are going to be quite down. So there's such a high-spec house that heating costs will actually be reduced. As you can see out there, there's green spaces, football grounds, plenty of local schools, a local hospital next door, so it's ideally situated.
I cried when I received a phone call from Sorsha just to be offered it. It's a great opportunity to have my own home. You have your solid fuel stove, you have the solar panels, which is great to have hot water. You know, when you turn the tap on, it's brilliant. You have the walled back garden. The house is quite warm, you know, so we haven't even used the heating since we moved in, which is great.
I was very delighted when I got the news. I was going to be given one of the houses in the new estate, and I was so happy. I called my husband straight up to tell him the good news, and he was delighted as well. I like the fact that it's my home in quotes now. I like the fact that I can live here as long as I wish, and according to the terms I could actually pass it on to my children. So it gives me a sense of kind of peace of mind as opposed to living in a rented accommodation.
The significant thing for North and East tenants is they have a security of tenure that they wouldn't have in the private sector. So they can plan now in terms of their children's schooling, in terms of where they want to work. They cannot, you know, and that gives a security for them into the future.
That's great, thanks. Okay, so that speaks a bit more than me going on about it but that's a very traditional kind of method of providing social housing. Because of the situation we're in now, and one of the things I'd like to talk about this morning is just two other ways of providing social housing that we're working in partnership with people in the construction industry and investments. Is we have a number of projects now where actually developers are coming to us and saying, I have a site, I have planning permission for 13 houses, and this is a real life example. If I build them, will you buy them off us? And we've one or two projects done like that, where there's a need that has been identified by the local authority, and we can provide the funding at the end to buy out the houses once they're constructed. And that's a new way of us providing and working with developers and people in the construction industry as well. The other delivery mechanism now we're working in that we traditionally wouldn't have is working with investment funds who are coming into Ireland or managed from Ireland in terms of constructing or buying housing and then leasing it to us over a 20-30 year period based on an income, based on a leasing payment annually. And these are the new mechanisms that we feel are going to be necessary to deliver on the social housing. We heard the Minister this morning talking about the huge needs and the action plan that is required, and I suppose what it just finally is the plan that we would be promoting is that we've never had a plan in this country for our housing stock. Never. We had an ESC report in 2006 that indicated that our country needed 73,000 units of social housing by 2016. We built about 25,000 of those up to 2010, and hence the result of the crisis that we have now because we never implemented that plan, and there was various reasons for that. Okay, so we would be promoting that we need short-term, medium-term and long-term plans, and what I liked what the Minister was saying this morning is there's some things that we might do this year and next year that we might stop doing then in the medium term, because we know that, and one of the particular ones that we have at the minute, political talk, and the Oireachtas committee is going to launch its report on Friday about all this money for social housing. We are in a reality that the amount of money we require as a state to provide the social housing we need just within the fiscal parameters in which we operate is just not going to be available. So we're going to have to find new mechanisms of delivering that housing, and that is why we're looking at the whole investment model, the institutional investments, who we're happy to take a return over 20-30 year periods. And not just in social housing too, in the private rented sector. In Europe, it's quite common for investment funds to own large blocks of apartments and be renting them out privately as well. And that sort of institutional landlord we haven't traditionally had in this country. And they are, again, there are a number of them now starting to look at Ireland and buy stuff up. And that needs to be encouraged. But that mustn't be, and one of the difficulties we have at the moment, and this is where a plan needs to be multifaceted. What is happening at the minute is we have a lot of our traditional landlords, and we all know, probably a few in the room, no doubt, who are getting out of the business because it's no longer a viable business, because not like any other business, our Department of Finance is not treating it as a business, but it's just treating it as a way of getting money from rental income, so it's becoming very unviable for an awful lot of people. And that's, Focus Ireland did research recently on the number of people leaving private rental sector. 50% was a result of rent increases, but the other 50% was because people were selling. The landlord was selling the house. Okay? So there's a reason for that. That's just not happening by one of the things, the housing agency, better management of our housing stock. I think someone referred to this morning, and that's across all sort of sectors. We have obviously one of the, I was saying to Shane earlier, Louth County Council has done compulsory purchase orders on 26 houses in the last 12 months that are lying derelict. There's no reason why other local authorities can't do that. It's one of the local authorities that's doing that. Derelict house, not being used, whatever the reason may be, going through the CPO process and purchasing the house, and then bringing that back into social housing stock. So we do need more new build, and one of the things the Minister said this morning, we've loads of land, and local authorities have loads of land, and sometimes they know they have it, and sometimes they don't know they have it. But what we do need, whether we have the land or not, is a land management strategy. And again, this needs to be part of our long-term plan in the provision of all housing. We need more partnerships, as I said, with investors. We have a huge problem with access to capital funding required to deliver this. And unless we get in new people with the pockets and the deep pockets, we're just kidding ourselves. And we can talk, and politicians can talk about, you know, all the money that's the capital programme, like with the Minister, the Social Housing Strategy 2020. The capital spend in that envisaged for the next 5 years is about at 1/12 of what we spent in 2005 to 2010 in social housing. So that gives you an idea, and there's a crisis. So that gives us an idea of what is required. Obviously, we're coming to, we as an organisation ourselves, we need still to get some capital investment from the state. But what we're doing is, if we're getting 20–30% from the state, we're leveraging that and borrowing the rest, either from banks or from the Housing Finance Agency. So we're getting a bit more bang for our buck from the taxpayers' money by accessing private funding. I think that's about it for now.
Thank you, Vincent. I think I'd endorse pretty much everything Vincent has said. I guess, you know, there's no magic solution here. A lot of what has been talked about publicly in recent times would represent very sensible and sound views, but the one thing that's required in all of this is a sensible, coherent, multi-year strategy that looks at the contributions that can be made by all of the various players, whether that's the state, whether it's the banks, whether it's other finance providers, whether it's the approved housing bodies, or whomever. I think all of those parties need to work together. From the approved housing body perspective, the voluntary sector, I think there is a little bit more capacity building required to ensure that some of them can play their full part. But it's been a very positive experience so far in relation to the ability of the voluntary sector to contribute to this in a meaningful and sensible way that is lasting. So that's, I think, the end of our presentation for this morning. We've got a few minutes if anyone wishes to ask any questions to either Vincent or myself.